We're talking about morality today, so I'm dressed for the part. I got my white for good, black for evil. I was going to make this video last weekend, but I decided it deserved a little bit more thought than I had put into it. So I put it off until this weekend, and here we are. So let's do it. Whenever you start learning about a new field of knowledge, I think it's incredibly important to look at the ethical implications of the knowledge that you're learning. And the field of reading body language is certainly no exception to that. Before I get too far into this video, I want to make it clear that this video is not meant to be a comprehensive analysis of the morality and ethical implications of reading body language. Instead, this is meant to be just sort of a starting point to get you thinking about the possible consequences for learning this specific type of knowledge. Now, this is a very philosophical topic, so I wanted to define a couple terms before we get too far into the nitty-gritty of it. The first being, of course, body language reading. Humans process body language sort of innately on some level, but in the scope of this video, I'm going to be talking about a sort of deeper analysis of body language that comes from a deeper knowledge and understanding of how body language works. So any sort of conscious processing that happens past what is considered normal, quote unquote, is what we'll be talking about in this video. And then the second piece would be morality, which is just a principle of determining if something is right or wrong. Now, the topic of morality is obviously something that is a much, much larger problem than just body language reading. And it's one that I'm not necessarily qualified at all to talk about. There's philosophers who spend their entire lives developing systems for morality and ethics. I think the philosophy of morality and ethics is extremely important, and I encourage you to do a lot more reading into it on your own time, because it's only going to make your answer to this specific question much, much more defined, and as a result you'll be able to make more educated choices about what you'll be using body language reading for. So I just really wanted to make it clear that the subject of morality is a huge field, and by no means is this meant to be a comprehensive answer on even specifically the question of, is body language reading moral? So now that I've sufficiently safeguarded myself by admitting I don't really have any qualifications to be talking about this, here's my thoughts on the matter. To make this problem a little less abstract and more clear, I'm going to exaggerate the problem from just reading body language to full-on mind reading. The piece about body language reading that seems potentially immoral is the fact that you're getting insight into someone's internal process without them being consciously aware that they're giving off information, or perhaps they don't want to be giving off that information, since body language is a lot of times a very automatic process. So by exaggerating the case to mind reading, we are really getting at the piece that seems immoral, which is getting information about someone's internal process without them wanting to. So to start, I would pose the question of, if you had the superpower of being able to read someone's mind, is there any case where it would be moral to use that power? Now again, without going too deep down into the morality sort of rabbit hole, because again that's kind of beyond the scope of this video, how can we answer that question in a way that we can apply it to reading body language? Since we are talking about a sort of supernatural ability being mind reading, my mind immediately went to the case of superheroes and supervillains. Now I realize this is not necessarily super applicable to reality of everyday life, but I think it's a good example, so stay with me. The idea of a superhero, by nature of how their character is structured, is they're an incredibly moral person, right? They have these abilities and they use it for the good of others, which again, by their character definition, we would consider moral. In contrast to this, we also have supervillains, which would be the opposite of that. Everything they do is very selfishly motivated. They want to take over the world, and in general, their character is written to be an immoral one. So in the case of mind reading, you could either use this power to become either a superhero or a supervillain, depending on how you use it. If a superhero had the ability to read minds, they would use it for the benefit of society. Their motives would be not self-motivated or not selfishly motivated, in that they're not going to be using this power for self-gain. Rather, they're going to be using it to help others and improve the state of society. In contrast to this, a supervillain would use it to help themselves gain more power, more wealth, more, take over the world, right? So if we go back to real life a little bit and take this example back into the scope of body language reading, why is it that you're trying to read someone's body language? Is it for personal gain, or is it to help that other person or potentially gain insight into their current mental state, so that way you're able to more adequately provide service or benefit society? And I think that's, again, a very basic way of looking at this question, but I think it provides a good starting point and a good guideline for how you should be using body language reading. So, as you're learning this skill and you're looking into ways to apply it into your life, ask yourself the question, is this something a superhero would do or something a supervillain would do? And I think that can give a very quick level of insight into whether or not you're using this skill morally or immorally. So to answer the question that I posed with the title of this video, is body language reading moral? I think the answer is it's not moral or immoral. The reason being, I don't think a skill or an object can have moral properties. The idea of something being moral is very much a human construct. Without humanity or conscious beings, it's very difficult to attribute morality, if not impossible, to anything. So the skill in and of itself is neither moral or immoral until someone uses it. And depending on their motive for using it, that's what changes the morality of it. There is something to be wary of, though, specifically with this principle, because it's so centered around motive. Your motive can be noble and great, but if the effects of it result in someone getting hurt, either emotionally, physically, or monetarily, in any way, I would argue that that's an immoral result of the skill. And that's a risk you have to be willing to take when learning how to read body language. Regardless of how noble your intentions may be, you might mess up or misread a situation, and that could result in some fairly negative consequences. And it's very important to be aware of that. Reading body language can be great, and it can have lots of really wonderful effects, and it can really allow you to connect with people on a deeper level. And it can also do the opposite. And I think a lot of people who get into body language reading, at least at the start, are not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it because either they want to know if someone likes them, or they're trying to be able to get kind of an upper hand over someone. And these are all very immoral motives, and just because it's a skill that's very accessible to learn does not make those actions okay. Before I finish, I really want to emphasize how subjective the question of morality is. There's lots of different arguments for different perspectives, and the one I'm arguing for is just one perspective. Again, the purpose of me making this video is really just hoping that it will at least make you start thinking about the question of morality in relation to reading body language. So I think it's incredibly important, and I see a lot of people learning it for the wrong reasons, and it's just sad. So in conclusion, be wary of how you use this skill. It can be very powerful, both for good reasons and bad reasons. So when it comes down to it, just be kind to people. That's really all that matters. As long as you do that, everything will be okay.